All right, so I just filmed a whole episode to put together tonight. I put it all on the computer, I download everything off the camera, and there must have been some grease or oil on my GoPro lens, and every clip was hazy, like I put Vaseline over the lens. It looked very 70s. Soft, never mind. So anyway, now I'm reshooting it all. Welcome back to the channel. Boy, things have been really exciting. I was just down in Kissimmee, Florida, Kissimmee, for the big Meekum auction. Unbelievable time down there. There's a huge video coming. I've been working on it for a couple days. It may be a two-part video because it's nearly 2 hours long. And I know, if you're not into cars, do not watch it because it's nothing but awesome classic and muscle cars. But, oh my God, the prices are through the roof. It's crazy. So anyway, back to the masks. This is another Frankenshrine episode on the Crimson Ghost channel, network, whatever I would call this place. So I just spent some time out at the Frankenshrine once again with Frank's brother. We had a really good time. We were exploring, through boxes and whatnot and finding really cool stuff. I could probably do a whole video on some of the cool stuff I brought back that's not mask related. Every time I'm out there, it blows my mind the stuff that Frank accumulated in his collecting years, and it's truly unbelievable. But tonight, we're focusing on masks, artifacts of the Frankenshrine once again. I think this is the 4th episode now in the Frankenshrine series. Those of you that are new to the channel or haven't seen the other things, I am showcasing masks out of my friend's private collection that was absolutely one of the greatest things I've ever seen in my life, and hardly any people ever saw it at all. He was very private. And now I've been bringing these masks back with me, a load at a time. I just got back with more, and there's so many cool videos coming. So tonight, we're going to start off with some of the stuff from one of the previous videos because something really cool went down while I was out in Florida and in New York. And all the way in California, something awesome happened. I'm going to show you right now what that was regarding one of the killer pieces I brought back from Frank's. And we're going to look at some new stuff I brought back on this trip. So let's dig in right now and start the show. All right, my subscribers will know exactly what we've got here. Those of you that are in the mask collecting hobby will know that that is a Distortions Unlimited heavy metal. However, a lot of you may not know that there was another mask that was the direct inspiration for that one. And it was made by Fantasy Faces Unlimited back in 1981. Not 83, like this one came out, but in 81. A man by the name of Rick Stratton and Mike Leveille, two men, made this mask. Rick Stratton is a very famous special effects and makeup artist in Hollywood. Worked on huge movies like Armageddon, Fright Night, all kinds of crazy stuff. This mask was made by him. It was painted by him. And back probably in 82, Ed Edmonds, obviously saw this, or he knew Rick at the time and said, hey, I want to put this out in my 83 lineup for Distortions Unlimited. And that's exactly how the Distortions Unlimited heavy metal was born. And when I did my first video, I was kind of saying like, oh, Distortions got the details really nice. That's because they used the production mold from Stratton. So the details are exact for the production mold. This is from the master copy though. So the size threw me off at first, but the more I look at them, I mean, all the details are there. But obviously, with a master copy of much larger size and much finer detail, better detail than like a production mask. They only made Rick Stratton made a handful of these. I'm guessing 5 or 6 copies total back in 81. I'm sure Ed Edmonds made quite a few of these in '83. It was a production line mask, but you could see the similarities now. So I really didn't, I didn't mean to say that they didn't come from, that didn't come from the mold that this was produced from. Well, it was not from the master, but it was from a production mold. Anyway, that's how they made that. But let's get to what I came here to tell you. So, some of you may notice this mask is now foam filled. A friend of mine, I sent it to him in California. He beautifully foam filled the mask. He does all of my high-end foam filling. Like I do some of my own stuff, but he does really, I mean, if there's a rare mask sitting in the room here, anywhere in this room, there's a 99.9% chance it was foam filled by my buddy. And so this mask, I believe, was purchased through Frank directly either from Rick Stratton or from my buddy Maskahuna in '81. And it literally sat in Frank's collection for decades. So I sent the mask back to California. It's getting foam filled. And I start thinking, I'm like, you know what? Another mutual friend of my buddy and I, my foam filling buddy, we have another mutual friend who's an amazing, knowledgeable, another mask guy in our circle. You know, he's one of the OGs, we'll call him. And I don't go around calling everyone, we'll call him an OG. My buddy, I'm not going to say his name because I don't want him bombarded with favors like this. So I knew that he personally knew Rick Stratton. And he lived 1 minute away from Stratton's house in LA. And I'm like, I got an idea. So I said, man, you know who has this in their possession? They just foam filled it. What are the chances of Rick Stratton autographing my copy of the heavy metal he made in 1981? And, you know, Rick is a very busy guy, and it wasn't looking good. We'll just say that. It wasn't looking good. His schedule was crazy. And at first he couldn't do it. He was like, I really can't get to it or something. And I said, man, just send him the picture of it anyway. Just for the heck of it. I want to see what he says, because he probably hasn't seen one of these, you know, since '81 or '82, whatever. So Rick Stratton sees the photo and he's like, wait a minute. He goes, that's my old piece. He goes, how can we do this? Let's make this happen. And I'm like, yes. I'm like, this is amazing. So Rick Stratton is going to autograph the very first heavy metal. And no doubt the very first, because this is the #1 pull from the master mold, okay? And at the time I did the first video, I didn't realize this, but my buddy who actually sent this to Frank in the '80s told me, and actually used his head as the armature for it. They molded my friend's head to make the armature to sculpt this off of. That's a whole other story. But he said, you know how you could tell this is the #1 pull from the very first pull from the master? He goes, there's a chipped tooth, right? I go, yep. Yeah, right, there is a chipped tooth. I go, what's up with that? He goes, there was clay still in the plaster mold. When they pulled the first pull out, the clay prevented the rubber from going all the way up in the mold. He goes, that's how you know that's the first master copy, because the clay was still up in there. And there was one characteristic where they always knew that was the very first pull. And sure enough, he's got that chipped tooth because of that. So back to the story. My buddy brings it to Rick Stratton's house, and they caught up and had a good time, I guess. But Rick really loved seeing this thing in front of him again. You know, it was many, many years. I guess he has one of these, but it's in sad shape. So it was really a treat for him to see this thing again. And he gladly took the Sharpie out and autographed it for me. Best wishes, Rick Stratton, 23. So that, I actually have a photograph I'll show you. You can see Rick signing this thing. Rick, if you're seeing this video, thank you. Thank you so much. I don't want you thinking like, oh, I want him to autograph it because I'm going to try and sell it or something. No, this is amazing that I own this thing. It was from a very close friend of mine, you know, who's no longer with us. And it means everything having this piece here. And just the fact that you took the time out of your schedule to sign it is awesome. Thank you once again. So that's the story on that piece. I just had to update you guys on the signing of it. and letting you know that the Distortions copy absolutely came from one of the original molds from this, but it wasn't the master mold. Like, you could tell, or maybe they took the master and made production molds, and so they were smaller, you know, whatever, but these definitely originated from the original down through the process. All right, so on to the next thing. So that's the number one thing I wanted to tell you in this Frankenshrine video. Let's move on. Now look at this. This is a really neat piece that I just brought home on this recent trip to the Frankenshrine. And Frank's collection was so vast that this guy was kind of stuck in a corner by himself. You really couldn't appreciate his hair work and stuff. He was kind of sitting not on a stand. So I'm like, man, I want to bring this one home on this trip, because this was sculpted by the great John Smith for Death Studios back in 1998. And it's simply titled Werewolf. But to my knowledge, I think Jeff offered these in 3 colors. Jeff Death of Death Studios made the brown version, a gray version, and possibly a black one. But this is just a killer John Smith sculpt. Look at that. Look at the detail on this thing. It's so wicked looking. And the size. This thing is so big. I have him on a metal pole. Much larger than your conventional Halloween mask. I mean, he's a big-ass werewolf. Look at my hand compared to this thing. I mean, it's massive. But beautiful hair work on this thing. I just had to show you this because it's a mask I walked by so many times in the collection, but I truly couldn't appreciate it much because of the way it was sitting, you know? Now that I have it here away from, you know, the spot it was in, I have it on its own stand. I look at this thing every day like, man, I just love it. It's tough to find. It's not the rarest mask in the world, but it's tough to find. And I tell you what, this is one of my favorites that was sculpted by the great John Smith for Death Studios. It makes me want to track down the gray version and the black version. I think there's a black-haired version. I could be wrong, but there's definitely a gray one. And if any of you out there have a super nice one, I would be interested one day in acquiring it. But nice hair work. I love how it's all trimmed in that nice shape like that. Just a great piece by Death Studios. Sculpted by the late John Smith. Look at that sucker. Alright, let's go on to the next thing. So back in the late 80s and early 90s, my bedroom was quite crazy. It was wall-to-wall horror. I hung out at the local video store. It was in the mall I worked at for many years. And I became very good friends with the owner of the video shop, the video store where I'd rent my VHS tapes. He had a great horror section. Always had the latest stand-ups, posters, everything cool, you know, and I got dibs on all of it. And my room was pretty nuts. So I'll show you some photos of my old bedroom around 1990. I would have been a sophomore, let's see, freshman, yeah, sophomore in high school in 1990, I think. And it was crazy. So, but one of the things I had in my old bedroom, I had some masks. This is when I first started displaying masks on shelves, was in around the late 80s, early 90s. Nothing like I have now, but I had cool masks. And one piece I had in particular was a Distortions hand puppet, a little zombie hand puppet, and it was called Rotten Hand Puppet. And it was like $13 new when I first bought it. And that thing sat on my shelves for years. And over the years, I lost it. So Frank's brother and I were digging through boxes and we're going through closets. And an hour before, I'm talking with a buddy of mine on a text message, and he's a big Distortions collector, my buddy Darren. And he goes, did Frank ever have that little hand puppet you've been searching for? I'm like, no, I've been through this collection so many times, I would have spotted it for sure. And he's like, oh, that's too bad, because it's, you know, it's hard to find. So Frank's brother, an hour later, we're looking through boxes. He hands me one box to open. It's like we're finding lost treasure every time we open a box. The coolest stuff we're digging out. And sure enough, I open a box and there's the hand puppet, brand new, in the original bag, like basically staring right at me in the box. And I'm like, this is crazy. This is like, Frank knew I was looking for this, and he's like, I got something for you. Take this, take your hand puppet home, and you can have this one. So here it is, the little rotten zombie, I think it's called rotten hand puppet, but it's basically a little dead corpse hand puppet. See the size of him? And this was brand new in the bag, so his hair is all matted down. I mean, he's a soft rubber, perfect condition. I got him on a little pedestal right here, but mine at the time had hair sticking out because, you know, I had him on display for a long time. But man, I cannot believe, an hour before finding it, I'm telling my buddy, nope, Frank didn't have one. I sure wish he did. And sure enough, I just could not believe this was in a box. So just one awesome little thing that happened on my latest trip out there. And Frank's brother and I were like laughing, like, man, I think Frank heard me and said, I got it. Here, look in this box. Here you go. But that was so cool. So we'll put him aside. I'm going to foam fill him eventually and make sure he is preserved for a long time, because you can never find these. It's not a really expensive thing, but you just cannot find these. So on to the next thing. All right, now I'm going to move on to something quite special, a piece that I would stare at on Frank's in his main collection room. I would stare at this piece on his mask shelf. It was always with a nice group of masks. That's one thing about Frank and his collection. He had the greatest group of characters and monsters. Like, I collect Don Post across the board. Like, no matter what it is, I kind of had it. And I would try to fill catalog pages, like every mask on a catalog page from '83. I want them all. Frank, however, was so into characters and monsters, he kind of seeked out all these amazing monster masks over the years and zombies and whatnot. So when you went through his collection, it truly was incredible, the amount of different monsters and different types of zombies and vampires and, you know, everything. It just, what an amazing grouping of stuff. Which brings us to this next mask. It's not a mask, it's actually a bust. It was produced in the mid-'80s by Harry Inman, the late Harry Inman, who made some really great stuff. And this is a pretty sought-after piece. Not many around. I mean, maybe a handful that I know of. And it's from an amazing 1961 film titled Curse of the Werewolf. So here is Harry Inman's Curse of the Werewolf bust. Look at this thing. Isn't that awesome? I believe the clothing did not come with it when Harry would produce these. Frank, though, had a tailor that would make special little clothing details for a lot of his masks. He really took the extra steps to make sure his masks looked as best as they could, especially by dressing them up. If they had clothing in movies or, you know, shirts and all that, he had a guy custom make little things for them, and it really set his stuff over the top compared to other collectors out there. But this thing is so neat. Harry Inman made them. Normally they were in a flesh color, flesh toned. Some had gray shading. This one, though, however, has like the bluish skin. I don't know if it was something he did special for Frank, because I read about it in David Lady's book, and he only talks about the flesh versions and the gray shading, but this one definitely has that greenish gray face. So I'm assuming he probably either did two different colors of this guy, or Frank wanted one different than everyone else's, because Frank was pretty particular in having like special copies and custom copies. The hair work was done by Laura Lady. She did hair work just about on all of Harry Inman's pieces, I believe. But I just had to show this because it's a thing Frank and I talked about all the time. When I would go out there, I'd look at it and we'd talk about, you know, the movie, and I just can't tell you how awesome it is to have this piece here, knowing it was there in the Frankenshrine, and it was something Frank and I loved to talk about and look at together. So So cool. And Harry Inman is no longer with us either, you know, so this is something that is very, very tough to acquire, and just a gorgeous piece. He really captured the expression, you know, well, and did a great job on it. So again, that's from the mid-80s, mid-1980s, probably 85 or 86, I think. All right, on to the next piece. All right, check this little guy out. So we're going to go back to the early days of Rick Stratton and his work, okay? Fantasy Faces Unlimited. This little guy with the eyeball problem is titled Walking Dead. And Rick Stratton, through Fantasy Faces Unlimited, made this back in 1979. And I was talking with Mas Kahuna, and he told me that they did a live cast of the late musician Scott McEwen. And originally the mask didn't have any hair. I'll show you what a photo of this thing looked like back in the early 80s. My buddy Mas Kahuna haired it, then ended up selling it to Frank around 1986, where this thing literally sat from 86 until a week ago in 2023 when I brought it home. Just truly remarkable that Frank kept this thing so nice all these years. And it's a really odd piece. It's not like a extremely sought after thing like Don Post Studios masks could be, or Distortions Unlimited. A lot of people out there wouldn't even know what this is if they saw it, you know. But it is so awesome that it's an original Rick Stratton piece, and it's got really nice work. I mean, obviously this was in his early days of his career, but even at that point, he was really, really good at what he did, especially makeup. He understood shading when he would paint a lot more than your average mask painter. Like, he had an edge over all of those guys. But this is, it's not the biggest mask in the world. You know, it's a foam-filled, technically a mask, I guess, but what a neat thing that, you know, yes, my friend Frank owned it all these years, but my friend Mas Kahuna is the one that sold it to Frank, and it came from Rick Stratton. It's just so cool. Back from 1979. I doubt you'll probably ever see another one of these, you know. It's just one of those weird things that, you know, there might be another one or two out there, but I don't know. It's so cool. I just had to show you this, you know, because it's so unique and different. And Rick Stratton, like I was saying, he really had a very successful career in special effects and makeup. You know, go look up his IMDb, and you will be surprised at who this is if you don't already know. All right, on to the next. All right, a lot of you may recognize this character here, this zombie. What movie is he from? I'm sure a lot of you know this is from Day of the Dead. This is Dr. Tongue, obviously. Dr. Tongue. Dr. Tongue, he's in the very first moments of Day of the Dead. You'll see him emerge in the beginning when the credits are kind of going by and the movie's just starting. So this particular copy is by Jeff Wehenkel. And this particular copy was made by Jeff Wehenkel. And Death Studios did end up doing these, but this predates that even. I believe Jeff put this out in the mid-90s, I think 96-ish. And it was made more of as a prop than a mask. So that explains why you'll see a deep cavity in there. But this is obviously not a wearable Halloween mask. But that's why I kind of like it more, you know. It's like a prop. And definitely you do not see these pop up ever. Jeff has made a few versions of Dr. Tongue over the years. I think he still makes cool ones to this day. So he's a very talented artist and mask maker and painter. I'm actually getting ready to send him a piece to paint up for me, which I think maybe we should do a before and after on that. Even though it's not part of the Frankenshrine like this is, I may show you at the end of the video the piece that Jeff is going to paint for me, because it's going to be a really neat before and after. And it's from one of my favorite weird B movies that a lot of you will know. So more on that in a few minutes, but had to show you this. It's foam filled. Frank had this for many years. I'm guessing he probably got it directly from Jeff. He and Jeff actually used to hang out together and go to costume shops and explore for masks out in the wild. So Jeff knew Frank way back when, you know, and this is really neat that this piece is here in the Crimson Ghost Mask Room now, directly from the good old Frankenshrine. All right, let's go look at one more piece from the Frankenshrine, and then I'll show you the piece I'm going to send to Jeff for his beautiful paintwork. Actually, before we go to the final piece, I got to show you something really cool. I already showed you this Ultimate Alien in one of the first videos. This came from the Frankenshrine, and I swear we talked about this in the beginning videos. If not, I originally thought it was a Death Studios Ultimate Alien. It's actually the original Kirk Brady one. So this predates Jeff's version, and it's got a really neat paint job. You can see little veins throughout the skin. It's funny that I can barely remember what I've showed in previous Frankenshrine videos already, but if I didn't show this already, really quick, this is the 1978 Ultimate Alien by Kirk Brady. And the cool thing I wanted to show you in this video is I scored something really cool to go with this. Check this out. Hang on. An original pair of Kirk Brady alien hands to go with the mask, which is insane. Someone randomly messaged me on Instagram and they go, hey, we know you've got the Ultimate Alien. They used to wear one on Halloween in the late 70s, and they still had the original Kirk Brady hands that I must say match pretty damn good to that mask as far as the color and the paint scheme. Close enough for me. I mean, I'm going to have them foam filled, and I'm going to display these hands with this Ultimate Alien. And that is an awesome, awesome mask. It's one of my favorite aliens of all time. It's just the weirdest looking one of all. And it's got this really distinctive, you know, look to him. And his eyes are squinting, and just a really awesome sculpt on this guy. But I cannot believe this is how these things happen. Out of the blue, someone's like, hey, I got original Kirk Brady hands. And I mean, the color scheme is super, super close to that Ultimate Alien. So that was awesome. I just got these in the mail today. Had to show you guys. And the Ultimate Alien, let's take a... I don't remember if we looked at this guy yet. I was going to take this to Death Studios and talk about it with Jeff. But then I found out through Maskahuna, this is the Kirk Brady, the original one. Uh-oh. I heard a cat somewhere. So this predates the Death Studios version, which I think is actually cooler to have the original first run than, you know, the Death Studios one. I think the Death Studios versions were all different colors too. They were brighter colors. So I love the color scheme on this thing, and just crazy that I got the matching hands now. That is nuts. All right, now on to the final mask of the Frankenshrine in this episode. What will it be? All right, I saved some of the coolest for the last part of this video, and a lot of you will recognize these as vintage Don Post mummies, okay? They are the Mummy B. There was Mummy A and Mummy B. So Mummy A was the calendar version, which came out in the mid-60s. So if you have that 1966 monster calendar, you'll see the Mummy A with his hands crossed with the red background on one of the pages. The problem with the first run of calendar masks was they were all pretty small. So Don Post wanted resculpts done. New versions of the original run of masks. You know, your Frankenstein, your Mummy, your Dracula, your Wolfman. That's why when you guys out there that have the reissue masks that came in those boxes, you'll know there's a Mummy A, a Mummy B, Werewolf A, Werewolf B, because there were two versions. Number one, the A's were too small, so they resculpted them. So you've got a whole different sculpt on a lot of these monsters back then. So there's two versions, which is so cool. These happen to be the Mummy B. You know, I wish Frank had a Mummy A. That would have been so cool if he had an original mid-60s Mummy. They are so rare. These, however, are still awesome. So, the Mummy on the right with the blonde hairdo, this is a mid-70s, like 75, 76 Mummy B. They finished the paint jobs with Fuller's Earth at the time, which is almost like a fake dirt. So if this thing was brand new, you'd feel like this grittiness to it, you know? It would have like a dirt feel, and they would mix it into the paint, and it would just be the really coolest looking finish for a Mummy, having that Fuller's Earth. It's kind of like something you'd put on a train set layout, you know, with fake trees and grass, and you would use Fuller's Earth for different things. But Don Poe Studios would use it on some masks, mainly the mummies. And the mid-70s mummies had the blonde hair. That's how you can instantly tell the age of a mid-70s mummy. They were blondes, okay? Now, going back to the mummy on the left, I'm not exactly sure what year it is. It would be post-1969 because that's when they came out with the Mummy B. They resculpted them and released them in 69 and brought them into the 70s, probably up till 73 or 74. And I'm thinking, this is my personal thought, and like I said, I don't know everything. I try to research, I try to ask people in the hobby that, you know, were around a lot longer than I was back in the day, that were around years ago. When I was just a kid, they were collecting these things, and I try to get information, but I don't always get all of the information. So I have a feeling that this mummy on the left is probably a late 60s or very early 70s version. As you can see, it has the slicked down hair, which is, they achieved that by taking hair and getting liquid latex and working it right into the hair. So they put liquid latex right in the hair fiber and slick it down, almost like you're putting hair gel on your hair by the handful. And I mean, it's the coolest effect, because look at that. Does that not look like a real mummy head? It's really cool. Looks super old, hardened, crisp. And if you look at the calendar photo of the Mummy A, they did that. They were doing that in the mid-60s. So I have a feeling this could be very late 60s or early 70s, before they just said, screw it, just put the hair on and sell it like that, you know? Just a lot easier, faster production that way. They're probably selling more of them now. At the time in the 70s, they're probably pumping out more mummies, and it was quicker to do them without making a mess of things. So those of you that know my collection know I have another vintage mummy here with hands, with the very rare 60s hands, the Mummy A hands, okay? There were two sets of hands as well as the two sets of masks. Mummy A hands and Mummy B hands. I have the set. I'm going to show you in the glass case. There is that set of Mummy A hands, the original calendar hands. So this mummy head, let's take them out and put them with the others. I've been dying to put them all together and study them next to each other. I want to see the differences, so hang tight. Holy cow. That, everybody, is a very rare sight. 3 original vintage Don Post mummies all together. Man, oh man. I'm just kind of studying these. I'm eyeballing the 3. Man. So what I noticed right away, other than the finishes all looking different, that middle one is so big. Like, he is the actual size of the head might be bigger than the others. Granted, he is foam filled. These are not. Okay, so these are kind of skinny on the sides, if you know what I mean. They're kind of sunken in a little bit. Nice size on that copy. Could have been a master copy. We will never know at this point in time. But, and usually the master copies had longer necks. But, Fuller's Earth. But, liquid latex in the hair, just like this copy. And this one did have a little bit of restoration work, though, by Kelly Mann, the mask doctor. He did do some resto work to this before it was foam filled. I don't know the extent of it, but I know he added some Fuller's Earth to it and really brought it back from, you know, the trouble it was having. And it looks great. I know this is a late 60s copy, which really makes me feel that this is totally late 60s, early 70s. Even though the finishes are different. You know, Don Post had different people painting on different days. Finishes can look different, but they slicked the hair down on both of those. So I'm guessing, you know, until I could really find out more information, I think that's, you know, 69, 70, 71 versus 75, 76 on that great mummy there. But isn't that cool? That is something you probably will not see anywhere else these days. 3 vintage mummies all in a row. So cool. Before I forget, I had to show you this awesome piece I'm sending to Jeff Wehenkel to paint up for me. Do a custom pro paint job. This is a life-size resin bust from what movie, guys? The Shockwave Zombie. He's a you-know-what. I'm not going to say the word on my channel. I'm afraid I'll get the video taken down or whatever, but this thing, Jeff did one. I saw his paint up of his personal copy, and I'm going to show you what it looks like now. I've been saving this in a box for probably 3 years, waiting to find the right guy to paint it up for me. And I just saw Jeff's version the other day, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to see if he'll paint mine for me. But this thing is going to look so cool. It's life-size, resin, hard resin. Oops. Oh, no, you don't. But the goggles are latex. I'm sure Jeff can fix all those up for me with the strap and everything. And if you haven't seen the movie, go watch it. It's a weird one. Very bizarre B-movie. All right, I hope you like this episode of the Frankenshrine masks, the artifacts of the Frankenshrine here in the Crimson Ghost Mask Room. Lots more coming. Man, we've been having fun out there. Frank's brother and I. He watches these videos. He loves everything I'm doing with them. He knows Frank would love them, and he can't wait till I come back, because it's so much fun when we dig through and find all these cool things, and it's a really good time. So soon there will be more Frankenshrine videos. There's more Crimson Ghost Mask Room videos, and especially a big video coming on the Meekum auction. Over 4,000 cars I walked through. Lots of footage, so it may be coming up this week. All right, guys. So I will see you soon. Thanks for watching this episode, and good night.